Steiner once spoke about and wrote about three governing forces in this universe that can be described, that can be used to describe almost every interaction and a lot of things that are present in the universe. And these three forces he describes as the Christ force, the Lucifer, the Luciferian force, and the Ahrimanic forces, right? So he describes three forces, right? And the way he describes them can be a little bit complex, a little bit complicated. I probably don't understand it 100% myself, but this is my interpretation of it, right? Now, when he speaks about these three forces, he speaks about a pendulum on a clock, right? So for those of you who have seen one of those old clocks, right? I'm not talking about clocks that are recent, right? I'm talking about those old clocks with a pendulum on it. The pendulum always swings from left to right, right? It always swings from left to right. And he uses this to kind of describe the human body, right? We tend to swing from states, right? The human body tends to grow older on a daily basis. But when we go to sleep, we also recover and replenish. So when we go to sleep, we grow a little bit younger, but we're also growing older. So he describes this as a way of describing there must be a balance, right? There must be a balance between the two, where there's two opposing forces that are present, and like a scale, it's kept from balancing in either direction. So it's a healthy thought to keep in mind. As humans, we are growing older by the day, but we're also growing younger in some ways. When we go to sleep and recover, we're also being replenished. He uses this to describe the blood and the nervous system, where the nervous system is rigid. The nervous system kind of makes us grow older in some ways. Yet the blood system is constantly being replenished by the blood marrow, and in a way, it's kind of making us younger. So he says you kind of need both. You kind of need something to help us grow older and grow younger in healthier ways. There must be a balance that's constantly restored. An easier way to describe it is something as simple as calcium. We need calcium to have strong bones, strong organs, even strong veins, a strong vascular system. But with too much calcium, calcification occurs, and the body becomes too rigid, and it can lead to a stroke, it can lead to a heart attack. So there's a balance between anything. When it comes to calcium, when it comes to any nutrient or mineral, there must be a balance that's achieved. And there is such thing as too much of a good thing, too much of anything. And this is the idea that Rudolf Steiner introduces, that there is balance in the universe everywhere you look, yin and yang, light and darkness, male and female, right? Different polarities, different balances that must be maintained, right? He also describes it as the sleepiness and awake state, right? Someone who is always sleepy, they might find it easier to go to bed. They might find it easier to have a deep sleep, but they're stuck in that sleepiness state even when they're going out and trying to have fun or going to work. It's not a good thing. And someone who is always awake, who's bursting with tons of energy, they also find it difficult to go to sleep. That's not a good thing. There must be a balance in between the two, right? And too much of either can be considered a bad thing. Now, there's the Luciferic forces, right? When a lot of people think about Lucifer, they kind of associate it with something evil, right? Lucifer in itself means the light bearer, right? And Rudolf Steiner describes the Luciferian forces as something that keeps us in a childlike state, right? It's worth noting that they say I think the timeline we're looking at, where he mentioned it was 3000 BC, where the story of Lucifer began, where he was one of God's biggest angels, and he fell through pride, right? And he describes forces throughout the universe as this childlike state, right? Where this fantasy state, this imagination state that the world used to be in before Christ walked the earth, right? Before Jesus Christ existed, we lived in a state where there were no schools for children, right? Where there were no schools for children, everyone liked to laugh, everyone liked to have fun. There were only schools for scholars, and we lived in a childlike state, this fantasy, this imagined state, where I can imagine being rich and famous. I can imagine getting $1 million. I can imagine my soulmate walking to me. It's like It's also this state where I'm burning a piece of wood. I'm lighting this wood on fire. I can imagine a big fire happening, but the reality is it might be just a small fire happening in that wood. But, right, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That fantasy and imagined state can be a good thing. It keeps you in a mind state where sometimes you need to believe in something unrealistic. Sometimes you need to believe in something improbable. Sometimes you need to believe in something that has a 5% chance of happening in order to make it real. It might not happen, but that childlike state, that childlike wonder, where it says, I'm going to believe in something, I'm just going to believe in it, even if there's no specific rationale, no proof it exists, keeps us in that childlike state, right? You can think of believing in it, just the believe. I believe in Santa Claus. I believe that childlike state, a fantasy, imagination, and it makes us young. Now, is this a good force? It has to be balanced, right? You don't want anyone staying in a childlike state completely, right? If someone is in a childlike state, they're going to avoid responsibilities. They're going to avoid going to work. They might avoid going to school excessively. They're going to focus on only having fun. They might not make enough money. They might not become successful. They're only focused on having fun. Even children might not think much about getting in trouble. Too much of that childlike state can lead to an imbalance, right? And any of that imbalance can be harmful. This is the Luciferian state that Rudolf Steiner describes. Now, he describes another state called Ahriman, right? Ahriman is kind of a state that reduces everything to data and logic, right? He described three timelines, right? The Luciferian timeline, which is 3000 BC, the Christ timeline, which occurred when Christ came to Earth, and then he described this Ahriman timeline, which is our current timeline right now, what's happening right now, 2000 to 3000 AD, right? Where everything is kind of being reduced to data and logic. Everything is about computers now. Everyone is overly logical. Everyone is it's a way of binding consciousness to reality. It's about being realistic. It's about staying on the ground. It's about when economic values decide everything in your life, right? It kind of hardens the soul, right? And he said the Ahrimanic state can be described as school. When you go to school or when you go to work, it's like you're growing older. You're not staying in that childlike state. No kid wants to go to school. No one wants to go to their job or school. But in a way, it helps you get older. It helps you take care of your responsibilities. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go pay these bills. It puts a monetary value on things. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things, right? Where everything is reduced to numbers, logic. Everything is dull, where it kind of dulls the soul if it's in too much excessiveness, right? If someone is all about money and if someone is always talking about numbers and what's logical all day, it kind of makes the soul turn cold. It's like these guys that in academia or universities that say, hey, I don't believe in God, there's no proof. It's like these guys that say, I don't believe in God because there's no proof, right? It's like these guys that don't believe in something invisible. And Rudolf Steiner describes it as magnetism is invisible. You can't see magnetism. You can prove that it exists. You can grab two magnets, you can prove that it exists, but it's invisible. And a lot of these guys that have too much of this Ahrimanic force don't believe in the invisible, don't believe something where there's not enough evidence. They have the logic and rationale to stay grounded and to be more responsible, to be an adult, right? Because and to turn the soul, to harden the soul a little bit. But they don't have the childlike wonder, right? There's the Ahrimanic, the adult state, and there's the Luciferian, the childlike state, right? And he describes the Christ state as the third field, the Christ state being the equilibrium, right? Keeping both of these forces balanced, right? It's a force that's supposed to keep both these forces balanced. It's not necessarily a force that it's like, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is evil, this is good. It's not necessarily like that. It's a balance between, this cosmic triad, these three energies, right? You can even think of the Christ-like state, right? There's a lot of guys, maybe if they spent all their time in church, they would think about having fun, right? They would think about doing something fun. They would think about making money, right? It's There's also, you can think about a Buddhist monk. He's always in the spiritual, or it's not necessarily a bad thing to be in the Christ-like state. It helps you grow. It leads you on the right path. But a lot of these guys who spend a lot of time in church, they kind of have that craving, that urge to have fun. They kind of have that craving, that urge to make money, to be an adult, to be a kid again. And he describes these three states, Christ, Lucifer, and Ahriman, as a balance that must be between in the universe, and the Christ state being the main driving force of balancing the Luciferian and Ahrimanic forces, right? Three main energies that drive through the universe, that drive a lot of energy, right? If a guy was focused on partying and having fun all the time, you might feel the urge to start working again, right? To start making money, to start being successful. And when a guy's at work all the time, he craves having fun. You can prove this experiment time and time again. And you can say, oh, it's about stress level, it's about something a little bit deeper than that. It's about, there's yin and yang energy, there's there's the Christ force, and then there's these two opposing forces, Luciferian and Ahriman, to balance it. And a lot of things in the universe can be described between these opposing polarities.